Hi, third graders. I just got our book today. I'm going to go ahead and start it. Searching for Super. And I always like to read the front and the back of a book when I get a book to see what it's about. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The superheroes of Split Rock are hunkering down. At least that's what the Baileys are calling it. But Rafter Bailey knows that hunkering down is just a fancy way of saying the heroes are hiding. Ever since those supervillainous Joneses took away their real powers, the Baileys and the Johnsons have been living in fear. Rafter is sick of hunkering down. He's had a taste of what saving the day feels like, and now he's desperate to do something important. So when Raptor gets an opportunity to fight with a real superpower, as long as he promises not to tell his parents, he is going to take it. No questions asked. With the help of his brother Benny, his cousin Thyman, and his best friend Juanita, Raptor Bailey is searching for Super. Filled with all the heart and humor of Almost Super, which Kirkus reviews called fluent, funny, and eminently sequel worthy, Searching for Super is a family adventure of heroic proportions. Some of you may have recalled before we went on our school closure, I did read chapter 1 because chapter 1 was at the beginning of the other book. So some of this may sound familiar, but I thought it'd be a good idea to read it again because it's been so long since we read it. Okay, here is chapter 1. Very fine, screaming, son. The only good thing about hanging like a sleeping baby strapped to your father's belly in an oversized canvas carrier is that he can't see when you roll your eyes. But let me back up. Dad and I hovered over a lake. It was almost midnight, and the Milky Way spread across the sky like sparkling morning mist. Um, Dad's voice came from behind me. My arms and legs hung down in front of me like a sleeping baby's. You don't by chance know where we are, do you, Rafter? That isn't what made me want to roll my eyes. Dad, getting lost, wasn't anything new. Usually, when Dad and I go flying, he picks me up and leaps into the air. I'm 13 and not exactly a lightweight, but as he has a super suit that gives him extra strength, and flying is his superpower, or rather, was his superpower. Tonight, it wasn't his power that kept us hovering over the lake, it was a military grade jetpack strapped to his back. He needed one hand to work the controls and the other to hold his phone so he could use the map application. That's why I was in the oversized canvas baby carrier. Sorry, Dad, I have no idea where we are, I replied. I wasn't paying attention. A cluster of lights poked through the darkness on the far side of the lake, but not enough to be the city of Three Forks, our destination. Actually, I didn't think Three Forks even had a lake. Well, drat, Dad said. This map application seems to be broken. Also, everything's in French. This still wasn't when I rolled my eyes. My dad is amazing. He's a superhero. He's also the only person I know who can get lost carrying a GPS enabled super smartphone. Dad put the phone in a pocket of his supersuit. I should have brought my own phone, but I didn't have any pockets. I still didn't have a supersuit of my own. I was wearing black sweatpants and long black sleeved shirt. Dad punched the small screen on his supersuit. The jetpack whined louder, and we started moving. I found the North Star off to the right, which meant we were heading west. That was at least the right general direction. The breeze against my face carried a hint of warmth. Summer looked around the corner, and the air up here was clear and fresh. I filled my lungs with the sweetness. It felt good to be outside. Really good. I spent too much of my time indoors the past few months doing something my dad called hunkering down. I started hating those two words, hunkering down. They were supposed to sound active, like maybe we were hiding in the trenches, waiting for the right time to charge. But really, they were just a fancy way of saying we were hiding from the supervillains. One in particular, October Jones. I stretched out my hands, feeling the breeze brush between my fingers like water in a stream. I loved to fly. Usually, my younger brother Benny and I fought over who got to go out flying with Dad. But 2 weeks ago, Benny had downloaded a new game on his phone called Virtual Goat Ranch. Now he spent his extra time raising virtual goats. Apparently, three of his goats were pregnant, and he wanted to be there as soon as the babies were born so he could give them names. Dad picked up speed, and the wind grew to a roar. It didn't matter how many times I flew, I never grew tired of it. Whatever problems I had in my life, at 2,000 feet, everything looked peaceful. Up in the empty sky, alone. Try not to move around so much, Dad called out. You're throwing off my balance. Well, not exactly alone. Sorry, Dad, I shouted over the noise. We flew for another 20 minutes or so before Dad slowed down. Is that a swamp down there? He asked. Does Three Forks have swamps? I told your mother we should have waited till morning. Dad looked to his right. Wait a minute. Is that Mount Rushmore? Right there. That is when I rolled my eyes. But, like I said, from my spot in the big baby carrier, Dad couldn't see me. Not unless we traveled 800 miles off course, Dad. That does it, Dad said. I'm calling your mother. She's going to have to look us up on the tracking system and give us directions. Dad started unzipping zippers and opening pockets on his suit. I had a sinking thought. Just don't unbuckle my. I heard the whip of the canvas pass through a metal buckle, and then snug material around my waist went slack. I fell, tumbling through the night sky. Not again, I thought. Stars and lights from the ground spun into dizzying circles. Wind rushed loud in my ears, but I could hear Dad's voice calling from somewhere above, I told you not to wiggle. It wasn't my wiggling that made me fall, but I decided that now wasn't the best time to start argument. I yelled, and yelling is harder than it sounds. Dad, can I get a little help up here? I spread out my arms and legs so that I stopped spinning. I estimated I had at least 20 seconds before I hit the ground. I can't tell where you are. Dad's voice sounded closer this time and to the right. It might help if you scream. I could hear teasing in Dad's voice, but just to be safe, I screamed. I screamed for a solid 5 seconds until I felt Dad's arms around me. There you are, Dad said. Very fine screaming, son. I get a lot of practice. I rolled my eyes for the second time that night. Hey, look there, Dad pointed. It's Three Forks. Sure enough, the familiar Three Forks sugar beet factory loomed off to our left, its large cement smokestacks cutting into the sky. Dad strapped me back into the carrier and flew down to read the street sign. He flew up, over, and back down to read another. He repeated this until I felt certain the mashed potatoes and chard I'd eaten for dinner were having a wrestling match in my belly. Finally, we reached our destination, an old house just beyond the city limits where we were supposed to meet my cousin. Well, I use the word cousin loosely. I have hundreds of relatives, maybe thousands. Uncles, aunts, cousins, second cousins, cousins once removed. We're spread out all over. There are Baileys in every major city and township in the country. I found it easier just to call everybody cousins, unless they're old. Then they're an aunt and an uncle. If they're really old or look a little insecure, I call them great aunt or great uncle. Dad landed on the lawn, or what had been the lawn once. Now it was mostly weeds, dead grass, and crusty dirt. Paint peeled from the small white clapboard house. Brown vines clung on the walls as if they were trying to pull the building to the earth. Bits of trash laid scattered around the yard. I checked the address on the side of the home. Who are we meeting here again? John Bailey, Dad said, and his nephew. They were the only survivors of the Joneses' attack here in Three Forks. He took off the jetpack and leaned against the porch. Dad climbed the stairs, then rang the doorbell. I forget exactly how we're related. I think it's through your great uncle Hamar Eugene. Or maybe it's my great uncle Hamar Eugene. Either way, I'm sure he was great, because he was a superhero. I gave Dad a curtsy laugh. How did Uncle John get to know to call Grandpa? Probably like the rest who are calling him, Dad said. They just keep trying different places until somebody picks up the phone. 2 months ago, we'd been attacked by a family of supervillains known as the Joneses. Benny and I, with help from our super friend Juanita Johnson, had been able to stop them in Split Rock, but not before the villains had stolen everyone's superpowers. I guess technically we still had superpowers, although I don't think I'd call them a superpower. My brother could change his belly button from an innie to an outie. My dad could burp in Russian. I could strike matches on polyester, not just on matchboxes. We weren't exactly what you would call a threat. And it didn't just happen to us. We started getting calls a few days after the attack. The Joneses had attacked superheroes everywhere. Most of our relatives had gone missing, but a few managed to escape. All of them had lost their powers just like us. Since everybody in Split Rock was still accounted for, that became our home base. One by one, superheroes started gathering in Split Rock, gathering to hunker down. Dad rang the doorbell again. Candlelight flickered inside the house. A voice called out, "Sorry, it's hard for me to get up. Let yourselves in." Dad looked at me and raised his eyebrows. He opened the door and we entered the house. Things were as run down inside as they were outside. Light from several candles bathed the room in shadows. Stacks of newspapers, magazines, and grocery stacks sat at the top of every flat surface. A collection of stuffed animals rested on boxes in the corner. They seemed to stare at me with empty eyes. A dishwasher lay on its side against the far wall. A large vase contained a dead cactus perched on top. An old man sat in the front room. Crutches lay on the floor next to him, and he had one leg propped up on a milk crate. A cast covered his leg from ankle to knee. 5 toes stuck out of the white plaster like little mushrooms. He had a blanket draped across his lap and a bandage wrapped around his head that covered one eye and half his face. White whiskers poked out around his jaw and chin. He looked familiar. I must have seen him at one of our many family reunions. Dad walked across the room and held out his hand. "Hubert Bailey," he said. "I don't think we've met. I am the great-grandson of George Ingibald Bailey." The older man leaned forward and shook hands with Dad. "John Bailey," he said, "son of Hamar Eugene. Sorry for not getting up. The doctor says I shouldn't put any weight on this leg for at least another week." Uncle John sat back and motioned with his hand. "Please have a seat. My nephew should be out in a moment." I looked around. An old sofa sat against the wall by us, but a large stuffed moose rested on top of it. Not just a moose's head, but an entire stuffed moose. Someone had positioned a cone-shaped party hat between the moose's antlers. "Yes, well, Dad said, we're fine standing." "How were things with you?" Dad motioned toward the cast. "Is that from the attack?" Uncle John nodded. "I was on top of the roof hanging up our decorations for National Peanut Month. There was a flash of light, and suddenly, I don't have my powers anymore. I'm a stretcher, or rather, I used to be. I'd gotten off the roof by stretching there, so I was stuck up there without a ladder. I hit a patch of ice, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital with this." He motioned to his leg. "I got out of the hospital a day later and found my nephew, who had managed to avoid being captured. Of course, we immediately assumed it was the Johnsons." "The Johnsons are another family of superheroes. For years, members of our families had been fighting in every major city across the country. With both our families claiming to be the real heroes, I thought Juanita Johnson was a villain until she became my friend. But the Johnsons had gone missing just like us. And when we finally found you all up in Split Rock, well, you told us it wasn't the Johnsons. That's when we started looking for this third family, the Joneses." I had been staring at all the crazy stuff in the room, but this comment focused my attention back on the conversation. "Have you found anything?" "About the Joneses, I mean." The Joneses, the real family of supervillains. They had kept the Johnsons and the Baileys fighting for decades. They'd stayed hidden in the shadows doing who knows what while the superheroes fought among themselves. Uncle John shook his head. "We haven't found a thing. It's like they don't even exist. We're still chasing down a few leads, and, well, my nephew and I, we're working on a few other leads." I was starting to like Uncle John. Only 2 Baileys had survived the attack here in Three Forks. But it sounded like instead of hunkering down, they were doing something. They were fighting back. In Split Rock, we had almost 80 Baileys and Johnsons gathered from all over the country, and all we'd managed to do was to perfect the art of hiding. I've been able to piece together what happened, Dad said. After they took away everybody's powers, the Joneses rounded everyone up and took them. Took them? Took them to where? Dad shook his head. We don't know. One Bailey from Nebraska said that no one was hurt, but he watched his family get loaded into a bus. The bus just drove away. Uncle John rubbed his stubble on his jaw. We've got to do something. All of these missing superheroes, supervillains hiding and plotting and scheming. Uncle John looked at me in the eye, his voice low and serious. It's only a matter of time before everything falls apart. I nodded. I had this sudden desire to stay in Three Forks and help. I jumped at the noise coming from the kitchen. Ah, there's my nephew now, Uncle John said. An older boy carrying a backpack entered the room. I put him about 16 or 17. His blond hair flopped over green eyes. He was muscular and tan. He looked well. Put him in a super suit, and he looked exactly like a superhero. Hi, the boy said, crossing the room and holding out his hand. I'm Simon. It took me a split second to realize that he had a lisp. Simon, I said. It's nice to meet you. It's not Simon, the boy said, smiling. It's pronounced Simon. My parents had a weird sense of humor. You mean, I'd never heard of such a thing. Your name is really Simon? Like Thimon? Simon nodded. I didn't know what to say. Sorry about that. Simon shrugged. It could have been worse. If I was a girl, they were going to call me Thethily. Dad cleared his voice. You said on the phone that only Simon is coming with us. Are you sure you won't come too? Split Rock is very likely the safest place in the country right now. Uncle John shook his head. Simon and I were following up on a few leads here. I'll wrap them up, let my leg heal, and then I'll make the trip. 2 or 3 weeks, a month at the most. Dad cleared his throat. Well, it's a school night for Rafter. We probably should get going. He didn't seem interested in whatever Uncle John and Simon were working on, but as soon as I got a chance, I was going to ask. I wanted in on it. Simon was shipping most of his luggage. We said our goodbyes to Uncle John and headed out to the front lawn. Dad put on the jetpack and strapped me onto the front and then wrapped his arms around Simon. Ready? Dad asked. Yep, Simon said. Me too, I replied. Dad pressed the controls on his wrist. The jetpack whined to life and we were off. The wind was too loud for us to talk much. I used the time to think instead. Hiding, waiting, and watching. The one time in my life when I felt most super was when Benny, Juanita, and I had saved the day. We hadn't hunkered down. We'd run out into the dark night and faced a supervillains. Ours was the only city where all of the superheroes had escaped capture. Thanks to us, we'd beaten a supervillain. We'd beaten October Jones. October Jones is not somebody you'd want to meet in a dark alley in the middle of the night or in a nice park in the middle of the day, or anywhere for that matter. I'd meet him and almost hadn't survived. The wind blew into my face, stinging my eyes. October was a super, which means he didn't have just one power, he had all of the powers. I still remember the last thing he said to me before getting into his helicopter and disappearing into the sky. Now I know your name, Raptor Bailey, and believe me, that's not a good thing. Sometimes when the sun was shining and I was safe in my house, I could convince myself that October Jones had forgotten about me, that he'd moved on to more important things. But other times I remember the look in that villain's eye, the look of hatred. October Jones didn't forget. Hunkering down isn't what makes a hero. Heroes get up and do something big, something important, something that everybody notices. That's what I need to do. And that leaves us to chapter 2 that I will read another day. Chapter 2 says, I'd conk him on the head. Thank you for listening, third graders, and I will talk to you later.